Alright, so looking in on Lijiang Tower on the garden side, talking about how you're going to be pushing in for the attack. So when currently looking at when we were playing against good old uh, Dismissed, they were running out on the same mirror composition as us going on to this Doom Reaper strategy. So now, when coming out onto this, we want to be looking to be teleporting our Reaper out here as well, getting a Doom Fist across this gap. What this allows us to do is if we take through main inside, yes, they do have the opportunity to push in aggressive onto us. What that actually does, it takes our flank and it allows us to have openings in onto what their backline would be. Now, not always do teams look for the progression to push through this way. They'll usually try to push through the bridge side. And this actually puts our DPS to an advantageous angle of where they could take this fight here to pick away at the back line or regress onto these tanks after we force out Fortify to be pushing in. If they push through bridge side, this allows us to have our momentum push through white and be able to have our tanks be able to take our DPS take these flanks through these different areas and kind of take space in these different incremental areas and really be able to poke out and kind of to split up their defensive resources. So, like I said, every map we should be looking to be setting up, teleporting, and crossing the gap with our Reaper and our Doom. This puts us into a evenish fight. What this could do is if you pressure right, you might have Reaper move back into here. Doomfist might play back, and you might be giving point control to the Doom, but after Reaper fades, they could be looking for punches to be possibly forcing a Fortify, and once Fortify comes out, this is an opportunity or go push point for us to be pushing in as a team. Diva here representing Sigma. So, here we committed the collapse. We did get Orisa in the scenario when we did push in here. What this opened up was their Doomfist and their Reaper were allowed to push in and get monumental picks going into this. And they were able to recommit aggression and then be able to slowly take their kite back to point and gain point control and send you through the pseudo choke. This is partly of what their DPS flanking was able to do. This was able to build the pressure from here and gain control of this whole little area, putting you guys into a pincer attack. So, yes, we did get the pick going onto the wrist in the start, but once they started their push, they're able to get the picks, they back up to point, and this has you close this gap and go through the pseudo choke where they can slowly dwindle you down and then poke you out as they gain their cooldowns back occasionally. And these are going to be critical CDs, and they'll keep their focus retained on the one target and slowly be able to pick one by one out of the fight till there's none left, and that's how they gain their point control. So, moving these onto the areas that they were set up pushing through. So Diva representing Sigma in these fashions, what we need to be doing is we need to be sending up a Sigma shield this entire time to move up to here, and then we can plop our Arista shield represented inside of yellow into this area. What they're looking to do in this scenario is they start their Arista shield, their Sigma shield here off, and they also keep their Arista shield inside, being black. They'll keep their kite back, which their kite back is inside of orange, and they'll actually plop their Arista shield right back down here. So, in the purple, this becomes their map control, and in the green, this is our map control. What they do is they keep their DPS sitting on these flanks off to the side. Occupied space being this color. They keep their occupied space by keeping their DPS behind the pillar walls in start, so applying this area, and then continue their rotation to retake this space. That being, this ends up being their map control compared to ours, and they're solely able to take this space. When we're taking angles like this, we need to be looking to not only capture this area as Orisa, if we can get them to kite back to this area here, as I clear. So not only do we get our Sigma shield here and our Orisa shield here, we use Sigma shield to slowly push up this area while their DPS tanks the flanks to slowly gain this map control, because we want to be able to take this map control, the concave them on like this, so we create a pincer attack. We've talked about this before multiple times going into goats. we want to be able to split up their defensive resources. 1 second. So, as we split up the defensive resources, their defenses start to weaken, and this allows us to take these point controls and either push them off a point and have them force a stand ground. And this is going to force out their critical CDs like Halt, the Kinetic Grasp, Fade, Amp, and these are all cooldowns that we need to slowly take out slowly or fast, depending on the way that we're trying to keep our tempo moving, to be able to win this fight and clean it up in a reasonable amount of time. So they kite back. They're able to play their Reaper and their Doom in these areas. They usually have their Reaper played up on this flank, so he drops in and then keeps that flank moving. Here, what we need to be looking to do to counteract this is, as I said before, we have our Sigma Shield push up with us. We have Orisa get about yay into point. We send Reaper and Doom to the one flank to contest out Doom. We keep Lucio to walls or out of Halt. And then we want to kind of play our Moira in this area where she's able to kind of ping pong between these flank sides, because we don't want to necessarily leave her in an area where she's going to be exposed to one DPS fade and then be exposed to the other. If we want to play her into this area where Doomfist would commit a punch or a rocket punch into the back line onto Moira. Moira can commit fade, necessarily not this way or this way, maybe stand still, commit a fade, she reappears in the same spot. So this puts Doom into an impredicament area where we can continue our aggression on both sides, slowly pinching them in, collapsing onto their tank line, and then retaliating our aggression back. Otherwise, we're not going to find much real value pushing into this. As we start to slowly take this, we're going to want to play our Orisa around this wall, essentially kind of like a corner, when we're trying to be holding these corners out to like what we would on like a defensive payload, or if we're trying to take space on a payload. So, assuming we get Doom out of this equation, this is a clear sign for us to keep our aggression. Maybe we can off-angle here Sig, or maybe we're off-angling as our Orisa, and maybe these positions are split, they're different. But either way, we have two defensive resources pushing in, creating this angle of attack where it's really going to pressure them backwards. And our map control is a lot higher, and our point pressure is going to force them either to force out these critical cooldowns and try to retaliate you with this bad aggression. So they'll commit bad aggro, or they will just have to concede, however that's spelled, I don't remember. Concede point fully to you, and that's going to give you the free capture. If this can go into, if we cross that gap, we had our DPS play here, and we push through, but they decide to go through point, like they're going to take these areas, but our DPS are already set into these flanks that they can look to take, or maybe push the main team if that's going to be more viable. Or if they go through white side, our DPS are set in these areas to where they can then have prime access to the back line if they try to do aggro pushing, because it looks like a 4v6. So then they'll open up, and they'll expend critical cooldowns pushing into you, so they'll have an easier time without having many pix loss. So that will open up the key factor for your Reaper and your Doom to start their push. So we'll be talking about that a little bit more going into reviews tomorrow. Talking about what we played against here on Lijiang. We rolled out on the Rein Zarya composition. I believe we played against the style. They rotated point, if I remember correctly. Playing in somewhat of a fashion like this.
Chicken seemed to do okay.
Yeah.
I wonder about being cold out there.
We'll have like a heat lamp and such for them, so I believe there's like a heat lamp for their inside their coop or something. I'll have to ask Mom.
Well, it's not so bad tonight. Obviously, it's gonna get worse.
Yeah.
Night.
Good night. So, moving into this, we're playing more to a hard aggro brawl set style composition. This is going to be hard, reliant on pressuring out their tank line, forcing out these critical cooldowns. We're playing off of hard cleave damage, and we need to be playing past the shield to really gain our effectiveness. So normally with it goes, we try to get Orisa somewhere fortified and sanctioned on that point. We look to send Reaper on a flank to contest Doom away, while Doom plays with the main team. We'll usually have Lucio up with us. And this is where we start to look for halts and pull them in towards the team, while our Reinhardt and our Doom and our Orisa push up with a Fortify as well, creating a massive amount of cleave damage and a large damage set. If you're high on an HP pool and you know you have the HP lead, you can even be throwing in Moira damage orbs. So damage orbs can even be looked at as a decision going into this, and this is going to help you really win the fight. Because with what they don't have much brawling and cleave damage or high damage rates compared to you. Yes, Sigma does do a considerably good amount of damage, but compared to what a Rein, a Doomfist, and an Orisa moving into a team, collapsing onto one target, they're not really going to be able to refute much aggression coming through with the Rock, with Reaper pressuring back. You're going to expel out Fortify, but you should be able to pick this within a timely fashion. This is 100% reliant on speed and being able to close this distance on the gap before you can really allow them to set up and instate picks onto your back line, i.e. your Moira, maybe your Lucio, or maybe they're even to find a pick onto your Reaper if he wasn't able to really pressure him out. With that as well, moving up into the attacking, if we take control of point, this is very reliant on playing your Orisa slightly back. Moira, your Doom will take an angle, your Reaper will take an angle. Normally you can run your Reaper and your Doom on the same angle with this. This being that your Doom will have access to the pseudo choke and as well as the flank to assist the Reaper if he needs to contest the flank off and the Reaper has quick access. Yes, you are throwing them off into the sides, but this is also going to be prevalent to how they're going to assist each other going into these wars or into these fights. So our main goal is to hold up with Reinhardt and try to use cleave damage to our advantage, and slowly like kite back a little bit, let them push in, get Fire Strike, build up towards our Earth Shatter. This is again where we look for an amp speed and try to push in with mass healing, and then a Reaper pushing in as well as Reaper, to create another concave and essentially cocooning around their Orisa or around their Sigma. Generally, you want to look to cocoon around their Sigma in any of these fights because he does have kinetic grasp. And that's going to be easier to pierce through than when it comes to going against Fortify. So when going against Fortify, it is a 50%, So when going against Fort, you do have to keep in mind it is a 50% damage reduction. When it comes to kinetic grass can only really absorb out projectiles, and that's going to allow you to kind of use cleave advantage to your that's going to allow you to use cleave to your advantage because he's not going to really be able to use that and transfer out the shields. And that's going to allow you to instate that pick earlier, and because of that collapse, you most likely forced out Orisa Fortify, so that can then be your second target, and that's what we should be looking to do. We rolled out with the same comp going out on Busan. We shouldn't, inside of, let me move this into a different area. So when looking at Mecha Base, we have the giant point, we have the walls that come up in these areas. We should not look to rotate up onto the coast side high ground. We should be looking to move to your attacker's left side or your right side, depending on which end you are, and taking the fight up there. Because if they move up there, we can take a fight to cleave. But if they play up here, this is a lot more predicament of an area. You can halt them down easier and force them into unoptimal positions for them. And then as the point unlocks, you can then commit your drop and play bottom side. As I said before, with halt being able to come from the backside, pull them down, or maybe from the sides, and then use brawling to your advantage. The balcony also sits on top of point, so once they finally commit their drop, you have brawling coming in at different areas, concaving again onto their team. They're not really able to shoot this aggression too well, and it becomes a lot easier. This fight starts to tilt less against you. So one second. So we're going to look at a more confined, I guess, example, looking into how we could be playing these shield wars. We've talked many of times about how we need to be playing these shield wars, or how we should be pushing, etc., 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 going into these fights, or going into point pushes. They're all relatively the same. But they all apply to different areas, depending on the map and the geometry, and you have to apply those circumstances to how they affect you, to your team, to the best of your abilities. So we're going to look at this again as the same Doom Reaper composition here. If I can find Reaper, there he is. So coming out is goats. You are going to have to bear with me because these are not going to be team specific colored. So when pushing out to the attack going in on King's Row, at the very minimum, we're just going to look at this one for the example because it's a good base example to set out. You want to push through main side. This is going to be the quickest rotation to point. It's not the same concept of when we play triple goat variants where we want to be able to get our whole team swinging wide. Generally, they're going to have to back up right away as you push up with Sigma Shield. Through this chokehold, so you are going to be able to swing wide going out here. Blue being your Orisa shield, yellow being theirs. This is where we want to take these off angles as Sigma, if we can, to be looking to apply our shield in the same way where we're committing these concaves. Once again, slightly pushing them back as we take more and more map control away from them. Generally, Doom plays up on the top side, so depending on how you want to push these, you can run your Reaper, or you can run your Doom inside of Hotel. This being depending on the matchup that you're going against. Maybe the Reaper, maybe the Doom's flanking a lot. You want to pressure him out as Reaper because you have a higher damage set, and you have the potential of nullifying punch or like any CC abilities with your Wraith, and you have an easy kite back. If it's a Reaper in there, maybe you want to go in Doom and try to force him to kite back inside of his team. Well, the Doom plays up here, so when he looks for slams as Reaper, you're pressuring him back with the high damage. So while that's happening, we need to be looking to slowly push up and push past these shields with their supports coming with us and the DPS controlling these flanks if they can. Normally, if our Reaper's controlling this flank, our Doom will be walking with us. If our Doom's controlling this flank, then our Reaper will be walking with us. But as we push up past their shielding, this will allow us to take more control of these of this map, of this point, being able to off angle a little bit harder and essentially force them backwards into this corner, or forcing them to play in hotel and try to wrap on us, and then we play like a defending team, or they're going to kite back towards their spawn. This is normally how it is when you try to play inside of goats. You're going to push this way, and your goal is to either get them to push inside or back to their spawn. That way they're either fully conceding point, or they're put in a position where they have to wipe. This is going to generally get you pretty much either 2 ticks. This is about 2 ticks right here. If they go here, if they go inside, then you're going to get about 3 ticks if they go into this corner and try to play inside this hotel. Especially if they wrap this way and you play defending and they're forced to step onto point. You can essentially brawl on top of them, eliminating their Orisa or their Sigma, depending on which one's playing in that touch. And then you can have your DPS angle in these areas, like playing in the hotel, maybe wrapping wide if they're or not wrapping wide like around statue, but like wrapping around car, looking for punches onto the hotel wall. And these are going to be advantageous for your DPS to get these picks. So moving up into this, when we're pushing our cart, we need to be playing to some extent forward. We can have our Lucio solo push cart in the time being while our Reaper maybe sets a flank. Our Moira plays. Our Moira's going to have more on the ground AoE healing. She's going to kind of be able to she's going to have more opportunities to be able to solo heal leisurely like this, but we have a Lucio solo push on cart. Yes, we don't have speed to be kiting back or that amped heals, but we need to be controlling this ground so our cart can get through pseudo choke. So we also have orb and a little bit of a higher HP palette coming from Moira's healing. So we'll have more, like a little bit more cover, especially when she's not a single target healer. She can catch 2 of these together, or a Doom, or if you're all playing clumped together, all 3 of you or 4 of you, depending on what there is, as well as orb to kind of take that extra pressure off when she's solo healing to make up for when Lucio isn't there. So generally you want to take control of this corner at the very least. They'll capture this corner. We'll have the advantages of swinging wide around this corner once we move our payload up, but we want to secure this one to stop them from being able to move up and secure this corner up here. We can play our Doom or our Reaper inside a bookstore. Generally we want to play our Reaper inside a bookstore. We don't want to keep our Doom inside of a consigned space where he's very dependent on hitting his abilities, being able to curve punch or land his slams right, and he can't use his uppercut to his advantage when it comes to using mobility to get back to his team. So generally you want to swap these 2. I can just swap that right now actually. So generally you want to swap those 2. If you can have your Doom do this long rotation within a timely fashion because they haven't secured this corner yet, then this is great. As they start to push up and try to push onto you, if you're not capturing this space, if you want to try to bait them in, this will open up for you to possibly get picks onto their support line, E back inside of your team, and then you can play this war out and then look for, as your cart comes up, look for that speed aggro, which is going to be very, very viable to you, especially going into this. It's the same way in concepts that we've talked about playing goats. Like, you guys know how to play your shields war, where you need to be playing swinging wide in certain areas. Your Sigma's going to still play like a diva, where she needs to be cognizant about how she's using her shield to help mitigate that damage, but she also still needs off angle to a degree, flaring from these shields. But you are just going to be a lot more flanker heavy, but you're all going into it. Your aggression points still apply the same when you're pulling out these key cooldowns. When we're aggressing, we need to make sure we are adhering to these target calls. Otherwise, we're not going to end up finding these picks when we are committing these aggression. Most of the time when we end up losing these aggro fights, it's because we're not adhering to these target calls, and we have to be adhering to them. There are times where, yes, as Doomfist or as Reaper, you'll be focusing out somebody that isn't part of the call, but if it's something so crucial like Orisa's Fortify, or maybe Sigma no longer has Grasp, these are calls that this is an all-in. So what is happening here is we need to be having a prime target focus to pick these off. These are very HP heavy characters, So we need to be able to instate these picks relatively fast, especially when these are the main characters that they're going to be stabilizing behind. Otherwise, we're not going to actually pull out these resources. Because once we instate these picks here, we'll have main tanks to be able to restabilize behind. Maybe that being the Orisa shield, or maybe it's the Sigma shield. And regardless of the fact, like, yes, you will be going low, you will be backing up, but as long as you're pulling them back, making them concede ground at the very least is going to be beneficial into keeping and ensuring that you have the momentum of your payload. Not all the time do you have to be clearing and winning these fights as long as you are pushing them back. You push them back, force out critical cooldowns, you play the war again, you force out the critical cooldowns, in turn they push back once again. That's going to be just as beneficial as cleaning up a fight, especially if you can use that to your advantage to be building up like your Reaper ultimate to then look and set up for a flank here and drop and then commit a Blossom for an easy wipe to ensure that you have an easy capture. Generally, you don't want to wipe too early going into these points, pushing on street phases like this. You want to be able to wipe after you're like pushing around this corner or as you're pushing around this corner, so that way you have a free capture. You know they aren't going to be able to get that one last fight back in. That's going to be really, really important for them to actually get that back in. So if you can drag out these fights, slowly push them back, build up your ults, and then be able to clear with like Blossom, or maybe you whittled them down and got enough CDs out, so then you use your Kinetic Grav, or maybe you even use Bongo to break out shield and just clean up the fight, so you have other major fight winners wrapping around this corner, because maybe you were able to get to this corner and now they're holding you here. You have other prevalent ultimates that are going to be beneficial for you to use in this fight so that you can enter the home stretch and then put them into a one-man stalling phase. So if we start getting the one-man stalling phase out, then we can start focusing on maybe using ultimates more directed towards tanks, and then just cleaning up squishies or letting them get a mass regroup on point, and then cleaning up with ults. So these are the main points that I could go over, or I guess I feel that are the easiest to go over without you guys here. If this is confusing or this sounds like just random jargon, then let me know. I can go over this with you guys a different way and explain it a different way. This is some of the key points of the aggression of what we need to be looking to do when we're pushing, how we need to be adhering to these calls. So, especially too when, like Orisa shield for example, there's an Orisa shield, they're conceding space, we want to push past his Orisa shield. I want to see a Sigma shield move up past the shield and escort us up. I don't want a Sigma shield where we're back here, it's now here and it's stopped. I want it, as we're moving, the Sigma shield moves with us so we can get the full value and it's not sitting out longer, taking in more damage, bringing down how much shield like capacity you actually have. That way we can be getting the full benefit of our shield, essentially, as we've said before in the term, leapfrogging. This way we can force out their Orisa shields maybe earlier, and then we can do the same thing, especially if we didn't commit our Orisa shield at that moment, re-extend past their Orisa shield and then use that to wipe, because they set down a new fresh set of cooldowns, and those CDs, pulling them out, are going to be really, really, really critical for us.